All right, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, as the case may be for some of you. Thanks for taking the time to join us today to review some of the new features of BCE Estimator and this new that we've released. And for those of you who've joined us before, you'll remember that in your webinar controls, you have an option for a little chat feature there. Maybe somebody could find that actually right and send me a quick chat and tell me that you can see my screen and you can hear me all right. Just make sure we got the technical end of stuff lined out. But feel free to also use that to send a message or questions as we go along. And if we can get to some of them during the session, we can do that, or we can follow up with you after the fact as well. So good, I'm getting some feedback that we're hearing things okay and can see, so that's great. And so I think without any further ado, we'll hop on in. So this is in reference to the latest feature or latest version that we just sent out, and that's going to be 4.11.12. And in that, we have several features on several different fronts. And we'll start with the 3D viewer for those of you who are familiar with that. Over in the Plan tab in the up right-hand corner with the option to open 3D viewer window, you can click on that and it will give you a little 3D rendering of your project. So here we can see our roof that we've drawn in here. So that's been there for a while, but one of the things that is new is the ability to adjust how things are positioned vertically in relationship to each other. And previously there wasn't any control for that. So in this case, just to take a quick look at this plan, if we were to look at an elevation view, it's this type of roof where you basically have a lower roof and an upper roof working together. But in that 3D viewer, they're not going to display properly in the previous version. But you have control over that now in this version. So to control that, you would come to those individual items, so those roof containers that were involved. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to come down here to a new option, which is Z offset. So unlike the x-axis left and right on the page or the y-axis up and down on the page, the z-axis is like basically coming in and out from you as you look down on top of the page. So how stuff is positioned vertically. So I'm going to go ahead and set these, and I'm going to say, well, these upper roof should be 9 feet above the other roof around it. So I'm going to go 9 feet, and I'll click OK. And actually, this one section up here, it's since it has this interesting jog in the back and the roof line is a little bit different, it actually needs to be adjusted itself slightly different. It needs to be more like 8 feet 4. So I'll enter 8.4 and make that change. And now if I was to view that same thing in the 3D viewer, what we'll see now is we'll see something that's actually a little bit more reflective of how the plan is. So that roof is drawn in, and you've got that upper floor that's sitting above where it should be. So that's the new feature we've added in for the 3D viewer, is that you can control the Z level of offset. Another change to a feature that we released previously is related to the blocking split feature. So last version we released a feature where you can take a segment line and set its condition to be blocking split. So it's easier to see blocking pieces and see that condition or that specific case is going on. So that was available already, but one of the things that wasn't available for the blocking split, where you're actually breaking the joists in addition to having blocking in that area, is the ability to have split overlap, so having those joists bypass each other. But that's been added in now, so you can set this offset for the joist at that split location. And then, of course, the blocking will adjust itself for those new plies as well. So just a slight improvement to that previously released feature of blocking split. You can now have a blocking split with overlap in that area. So another feature then that's new is the ability to send something to BC Calc. So for those of you who have used BC Estimator for a while now, you all know that BC Estimator is not design software, and it still isn't design software. But what we've done is we've allowed you to take the geometric data from things that you've drawn, such as a beam, and send that geometric data out easily to BC Calc, to the web BC Calc, so that you can then take that through a single member sizing if you wanted to validate a particular member, whether it's a joist or a beam, and basically just kind of get you hit the ground running as you do a single member sizing on a particular item. So the way that would work is if you came to, we have this Versalam here that's across the front of this building. And I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to choose the option to send to Calc, send to BC Calc. And I'll get a little preview window about it, and I can set the option for building code, but it tells me, okay, this is the floor beam product that you're using, these are the plies, this is the length. If there was a pitch involved, it would tell me that. And it also tells me the bearings. Now, where did it get the bearings from? In this case, it just, it says basically have one at 0 and one at the other end. But how did it know that? So I'm going to click cancel. As we look at the drawing, and we'll see that there are no bearings here. And so the reason that it came up with those two bearings is since it's not uncommon for people who are using BC Estimator to not draw in their bearings, if there are no bearings found, like no drop beams or no walls found that were drawn in, the assumption is made that, well, there's a bearing on either end. If there was a hanger, it would reflect the hanger. So like, for example, if I come to here and I choose to add a hanger at that location, then we'll see in a moment what that does. In addition, I could also choose to add a post in at a mid-span location or at the end. Here I'll add it in at some mid-span location right there just for demonstration. So we've made those changes. Now let's go ahead and right-click, and I'm going to send to BC Calc. I'll get that preview window again, but some things have changed. First, you can see that the hanger is now designated as that original bearing location, since that's its bearing type. The unspecified, since I didn't give any more information about it, is that post there in the center. And so at that specific location. So that's being passed along to BC Calc. And then finally, since there's nothing at the other end, it's just assumed that there's a wall plate there. So I can make those settings. I can choose the building code that I want. And then at that point, I can click OK. Now this version is going to be sent to the web version of BC Calc. For those of you who are still using the BC Calc on your local system, that, as I understand it, is going to be phased out here in the very near future. So you may want to make that transition over to BC Calc on the web. But just to pull this over here in the web browser, so this is what was brought up. I chose to add it to a new analysis. So here's my beam. Now notice that it's called, in the description in the name, it's called C1. And if I look over here, since I sent it to Calc, I now have this .C1 that's added to the end of my beam. If I was to send another joist, so here's another one, here's a BCI 5000, and I can choose to send it to Calc. Here's the information about it. I'll click OK. Notice that I get the C2 designation. I'll pull this web browser back over, and so now we have that C2, and that is that BCI 5000. So at this point, I can open up one of these calcs, and it will open here, and I'm not going to do the whole training or anything about how to use BC Calc, but just to show you that here it visualizes. We've got the hanger on one end, we've got that post in the middle, got the bearing wall on the other end, and then you could choose to come through here and apply the loads to the project as is appropriate. So the loading information is not included for you. There might be some things that are added by default just because that's how BC Calc works. But the loading would be something that you would want to review within BC Calc so that your actual analysis that you run is correct. But then as you do those and you produce that output and produce layouts, because you have that correlation, that cross-reference of C1 and C2, it's easy for you to be able to see, oh, where were these single member sizings done? They were done at these specific locations on the drawing. So that's the new feature that we've added in that allows you to send stuff to BC Calc. Going on to framing layouts, several different things with framing layouts that we've added in, some fun items actually. Oh, one of them is the components of framing layouts and being able to have flexibility with them. So I'm going to click View on this framing layout that I've already created. And as we've noted before, you can right-click on the image and choose to reposition that image somewhere, anywhere on the page. And that includes all the way over here underneath the material list, basically anywhere inside this box, you can put this image. But in this new release, in addition to that, you can also drag some of these other components around. I can click on the material list, drag it down. I could take this out for approval note, put it out right over here underneath my material list so it's really clear. Drag up the notes, and so on and so forth. I can also, if I need to just return something to its original location, if I right click on it, I can choose reset position. But now if I do this, I can just close my layout view. And if I was to view that layout again, the software remembers what I've done. So it's not like I have to go back and reset all that again. It remembers those positions and holds those in those places. In addition to that, I also have now flexibility to define where do my framing details that I added in down here that come along with my layout, where do they get added in at? Do they array from left to right across the bottom? Or would I prefer them to go from the upper left down the side, and other options as well? So like I could come here and I could change my layout style to a new one that I've created for myself that has the details in the upper corner. I'll click View. And now those details array from the upper left going down the page that direction. I could have them go from left to right across the top, from the bottom going up, however it is that you would want to do that, but you have control over how those details are arrayed. To make that change, or that choice, or that adjustment, you would come to the Profile, come to the General tab, and then here in the Framing Layout section, you can choose to either create a new one or adjust an existing one. And the specific settings that you'd want to make are down here with detail placement. Are they start at the top left or bottom left, and then which direction do they go, vertically or horizontally? Back in the Framing Layouts tab, a small change here, we've added this checkbox in for a master control, so if you need to quickly deselect or select all of the framing layouts, that you have control over that now. And then another one to edit or change a framing layout title. Before you could just click in here, but now you need to click the edit button here to change the name of the layout. And part of the reason for that change was that you, as another feature, where you can actually drag and drop the order of your framing layouts. So you can move these, just drag and drop them into the order that you want, so that as you work on your project and export them to PDF, they'll be in the order that you would desire them to be. Just seeing, okay, and I think that covers those. So then we move on to another section, which is a little bit longer explanation related to option projects. How can you handle jobs that are heavy with options in them, like media room and living room, or media room, extended kitchen, bedroom 4, those types of things. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute, but at the moment I also wanted to pause and say, well, if you're listening and you're following along with this and you're saying, well, I don't ever do those types of jobs, I'd encourage you to hold tight if you can and listen, because some of these features that I'm going to be talking about here in a minute, while they were put in initially here to be a help to option type projects, they're certainly not limited to that scope. And they may have value to your workflow and the different things that you'd like to accomplish. So they're just individual features that put together can be useful for options, but individually they can are useful by themselves. So with that said, let me just clarify a little bit about what we're talking about when I say option type projects. On this plan, and I'm going to come to the floor plan just real quick, Turn the visibility up a little bit so we can actually see. So we've got a main floor, an upper floor that's here. But if I zoom on this upper floor area, you can see, okay, I've got this, as it says, option number 1, bedroom, form, bath 3. So for this project, you could build this house in at least 2 different ways. First, you could build it in the standard way, the vanilla version, if you will. Or you could choose to add in this bedroom 4 with bathroom 3. Most of the house is the same, but there's just some portion of it that's going to be adjusted to allow you to add this option in. So when I say option type projects, that's the type of thing that I'm referring to. And of course, with this plan, you also have options for elevation A and elevation B. So now there's more variations involved. And for those of you who work on these projects for large national builders or tract home type builders, you may have encountered even more significant collection of features where you have 7, 8, even 9 different options for a single plan with multiple different elevation types. So at the end of the day, you end up with a whole bunch of different variations that just a single plan could end up in. And so when we were trying to solve this problem, we weren't really trying to solve the problem for somebody who was doing a site-specific layout. Meaning it's like, well, this person knows that they want this plan with option 1, and that's all you need. Well, that's pretty straightforward. But we were trying to make it easier for those who needed to do framing layouts and do material estimates for a particular project when you had to provide the answer, the solution, if you will, for all the different variations that an options project might bring. So what do you need to add or subtract to that? So just a quick visual here to show you the approach that we took as we were thinking about how to help users with that. So the idea is that as you would start on a project like that where you have an options job, is first you would start with your standard list and you would work on creating your standard list. You would just the very basic vanilla vanilla project, no options, just a straightforward job. And so you're going to go through and you're going to do your takeoff on that. And then once you have that, then you're going to work on your first option. And the way you do that is you're going to copy it, the original list. And so what you end up with is your standard list and then a separate copy of it. And then you go to that copy and you adjust it, change it, move it around enough so that it becomes now what would need to be changed if you were going to make elevation B, if that was the option you were working on. So you'd have the standard list, and then you would have a list that reflects everything you need to build it, but with the tweaks that are needed to make it elevation B. Then if you had another option, like say the media room option, you would follow that same pattern, that same concept, where you're going to take that standard list that you've already created, copy it, and then you're going to adjust that standard list that you've copied to make the tweaks and changes that are needed in order to turn it into the media room option. So it would be a complete material list to build the house with just the media room option. So the idea then is you end up with a collection of lists at the end of it. You have your standard list, and then each of the individual options that you might have for your project, and a complete material list for it. So then at the end of the day, what you can do is you can run a report that says, okay, here's the standard list, here's the standard list tweaked to be elevation B. Tell us what the solution is for what do I need to add and subtract to the main list in order to get to elevation B. And in the same fashion, compare the media room option list back to the standard list and find what do I need to add and subtract in order to get to the media room option. So then ultimately then I can end up with, okay, if I'm doing the standard list with elevation B and with the media room option, then that means I would need to add and subtract these things and add and subtract these things to get to the final solution. So that was what we were, since we already had users who were essentially doing that concept, we tried to add in features that would make that much more straightforward to be able to do within the software. So with that background, let me show you there's 3 features that we added in to help with these option type projects. The first comes down to the copying the list. So what I said there in that little diagram, where you start with the standard list and you copy it. So here's my elevation A list. It's the standard version, and so I have my upper floor, my framing for that, my lower floor. So one of the things I can do now is I can right click on the list and choose copy list. Okay, that's always been there, standard stuff. But one of the things that we've added in is this right here, this middle line that says to clone links. Meaning it's going to copy the takeoff items to new digitizer pages. So I'm going to choose retain inputs, clone my links, and keep my notes, and I'm going to give this a title that's appropriate. We'll call this bedroom 4, or with bedroom 4, elevation A with bedroom 4. So we make that change, and we'll click OK, and it's going to go through and it's going to copy those things. And now in the list tab, I've got a new one up here, elevation A with bedroom 4. And these lists, if we were to look at them right now, they're basically identical copies of each other, the same type of material in both of them. But the difference is that if I come to, say, the upper floor, and I come to this beam right here. So I'm on my original list, and I'm going to select it here. And let's say I do a zoom to, meaning I want it to show me what is this linked to over in the digitizer. So I'll click this button, come over to the plan to see what it's brought into view. And here I am, I'm at this top page, floor plans, and I've got my original, this beam here that I've drawn in. So I'm linked to that item. But if I come back to the list now, I go to my second list. I'm going to come to that same beam, or at least it appears to be the same beam in the list. And again, I'm going to choose to zoom to, show me what I'm linked to over in the digitizer. Come to the plan, see where I'm linked at. And notice I'm no longer on that top page anymore. Instead, I'm down here in this new collection of pages that's been created before me inside of this folder called Elevation A with Bedroom 4. You see, I'm on a new page with new takeoff items linked to that new list. So what that means is now I can actually take this beam and I can adjust it like this, and it will have only impacted or changed this list here, elevation A. It will have had no impact on the original list of elevation A. The elevation A with bedroom 4 has changed to 210s, while the elevation A remains as 2/8. So you're able to then go and make changes to that to adjust what's necessary to make it bedroom 4. So in this case, just to kind of play with this example just a little bit, we won't go into all the details, but since this is the upper floor being built over the lower floor, previously there wasn't any floor in this area because it wasn't any upper floor there. But now with this elevation change, or with this bedroom 4 option, all of this needs to be floor. So I can take my floor container here and I can say, okay, I'm going to adjust this area and put it up here. And we'll add a node in this area. And drag that down, and we'll add one more node in here. So we get the idea. So now we've changed the floor framing in that area. We've adjusted this beam, and you could change other things as well, but we've made changes. And so now we have 2 different material lists. Looking back over the list, we have elevation A, which is what would be needed to build the original list. And then we have elevation A with bedroom 4, which tells us a complete material list of what we need to be building that whole building with bedroom 4. And let's say there was another option with this. Let's see, we'll right click here, we'll copy list. Let's say there was a media room option as well. So I'm going to come here, we'll clone our links again. We'll do elevation A with media room, and we'll retain these things as well. Click OK, and once again we're going to get another list up here. And let's say for the media room option, just for just for example, the rafters, because of how walls and bearings were available, these BCIs need to turn to 6,000s or AGSs. Let's go to 6,000s and 16-inch ones. So it had to have, because of the framing underneath, it had to have some beefier rafters in place. So we make that change. So now we have 3 different lists, and they're all reflective of what will be needed for the specific option I'm referring to. So that is feature number 1, is the ability to copy list and use the clone links feature, which again may have utility in your workflow for other things as well, besides just an options project. But the second thing would be, how do you report on this material? How do you report it to show those adds and subtracts? I'm going to come to the Reports tab, come to the plus button, click plus, and I'm going to add a new report in here. Call this new compare report. Of course, you could edit an existing one as well. In order to make use of this new feature, you'll need to have either a condensed or a direct ship list style. So I'm going to choose condensed, make a QL, and now I have this third radio button down here as an option, list comparison. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick, what is the list that I want everything to be compared against? What's the standard, if you will? And so since my elevation A was my standard list, my vanilla version, if you will, you would then go to elevation, then you can come to the list you want to have compared to it. So here in elevation A, I have the bedroom 4 and the media room. I want both of those to be compared. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to choose the view. And when I do, you're going to end up with a material list, like you would expect: elevation A, upper floor materials; elevation A, roofing materials. But now we have a few other things that are added in here. Here's elevation with A with bedroom 4, materials to add and materials to remove. Same with the media room option. Here's materials to add, here are materials to remove. So by looking at, you can imagine that there might be 6 or 7 more options that might be in this list of materials right here. So what I could have then is I could have a base material list, and then indicators of, depending on which options are being picked for a specific site model, I would know what materials need to be added and what materials need to be removed. It's worth noting here that if you had a plan that had multiple options in it, and if any of those options interrelate with each other, meaning if you have both options together, the framing becomes something entirely different again, then that would be a different list that you would have to create over here in the list tab. You would have to create that variation as well. So if you had 2 options that interrelate with each other and change the framing for both of them, you'd have to handle that separately. There was a question about what happens if you make an error in the base and you need to make a change. So yes, and that is a point. And so elevation A, if you found out later that you made a mistake that you had replicated then out across the list, yes, unfortunately, you would have to change them in all the other places. So recommendation is spend all of your time first on your standard, do your double check review and everything else, and verify that, yes, this is how we want to frame this all before you go and start copying it all the way out. But yeah, good question, and that was true. You would need to change it in those other places if you found a mistake after you had copied stuff. So that's the reports feature. And then just one final thing on the reports is, if you if you want to see what would it look like for a specific site model, just apply the adds and subtracts to the list. I'm going to come back to the edit button. So if you can follow this logic here. So here I can choose my list comparison. What am I comparing to? What am I going to include? So let's say this time I just want the media room option. And instead of giving me a primary list with add and subtract values, I could change that and say, I just want a single list. Basically, do the add and subtracts for me. I'll click OK, click View, and when we do, now we get a list of materials, but notice that I have no add and subtract sections down here for the media room options. It's not because they didn't have to be applied or it didn't need to happen. They did, but because we chose that style of reconciled report, it actually already applied all of those adds and subtracts to the list. So now I just have a complete material list that would be appropriate for building the media room option. I could make it even more, oops, don't want to delete it. I can make it even more involved by saying, well, I want to have the bedroom 4 option there as well. Click OK, click View. Again, I strictly just have a single material list, but all of the adds and subtracts that have been needed to make bedroom 4, media room, elevation A, they've all been done and applied to that single material list. Okay, and then so that's the second feature related to options that we added in. And then finally, the last feature that we added in for these option type projects comes back to framing layouts. And it's the ability to have multiple framing layouts on a single page. Because we found that if you're doing framing layouts for a large project like this, they could be 6 or 7 different variations for each floor, and rather than having to have a whole bunch of just different pages, giving you the option instead to combine many of those onto a single sheet. So I can come to these. Let's say I wanted to combine all 3 of these into a single layout. I have this option up here, this new button called Combine Selected Framing Layouts. So anything that's selected here is going to apply to when I click this button. So I'll click here, and I'm going to combine those layouts. I'm going to call this Options. Click OK. And now I've got this parent item, and those have become children to it. So these framing layouts here are all can be viewed individually. You can see I can come to them individually and click View. But now I have this upper level item that's not exactly a framing layout itself, but it's going to combine all of them together. So when I click that View button, actually I'm going to put this out in 24 by 36 since that's a little more realistic. So I'll click View. When I do that, then I've combined all of those framing layouts into a single sheet into different quadrants. I can reorder those quadrants too by adjusting the layout order out here. But notice also that those changes that we made to this upper floor plan, as far as the material list position, those were remembered and held onto. And this, I can adjust these individually as well on these different pages. So that's you can imagine you could use that. Just even want to, outside the scope of an options project, you may want to just combine different layouts onto a single layout sheet. A simple example for that potentially might be like a unitized type project where you want to be able to just show the framing layout for Unit A, Unit B, Unit C, and what a single materialist would look like by that, and then add multipliers on it to it later. So that's the framing layouts. And so all of those, again, are under kind of that umbrella of we were trying to provide some features that would make option jobs more easily to handle and be able to leverage some of those tools better in the software. So then in finishing up, there's a few things that we should note, a couple other things that are new. One is under tools and settings. One of the options that you have available is this product information database, meaning you can assign SKUs. So if your business requires you to be able to export information that you do in BC Estimator and send it out into a particular set of SKUs and have that imported like into a point of sale system or another management type system, then you could do that. You could do some SKU mapping and have those products go out there and have that import for you. So just making you aware that that feature has been made available here in BC Estimator. If you have more questions about that, I can tell you about it. But then also in the realm of BC Connect, a couple other changes. First of all, BC Connect has gone through some upgrades recently, just to more on the back end of how the structure is, and so we've updated our site as well to be up to date with those new BC Connect changes, so that's there for you. And then also one other smaller change, but is a change, is if I set this to be a distributor, if you are a distributor location, you would now have the ability to specify, in addition to that location, you can specify a dealer. And then one other change with the BC Connect stuff is that while before you kind of had to progress from top to bottom in order to pick something in this list, we've now changed that so that you can actually bypass dealer and builder and just even go straight to project and find your project. So if I was to be here where I have even more projects and builders involved on this location, I could bypass builder and go straight to my project and find it here in the list. So these act more just as filters now, and you don't necessarily have to, or you're not necessarily forced to go in that particular order. So I think that brings it pretty much to a close as far as the new features that are available in this latest version of BC Estimator. We were recording this call, so if you wanted to see some of those features again and wanted to just see them a little bit more and be able to stop and play, just send us an email. We can send you a link to that recording. And as always, if you have questions about how some of the new features work or any of the features, love to talk to you, help you out, and get you moving further along the way. So don't hesitate to call us, write us, or send us a chat, and we're happy to do that. So thank you for joining us today, and have a good afternoon.